Welcome to AUA Leadership in Business, an official podcast of the American Urological Association. This episode is brought to you by the AUA Young Urologists Committee.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AUA podcast on practical advice to physicians searching for a position, work-life balance. I'm Stephanie Hanchuk, a current chief resident at Yale Urology, heading back to Manhattan next year for a private practice position. And I have the great pleasure to speak with Dr. Hans Arora today. Hi, Dr. Arora. How are you doing?
I'm well, Stephanie. Thanks for having me today.
So when I first received this invitation to host the podcast, I reviewed your bio by Googling you. And I was like, if anyone can speak about work-life balance, it has to be Dr. Arora. Your resume, just to share a few highlights with the crowd here, is incredible. After getting your bachelor's in chemical engineering with honors, you then got an MD and a PhD from Northwestern. You graduated magna cum laude into AUA, completed your residency training at Cleveland Clinic, then did a fellowship in pediatric urology at Lurie Children's, and then you got additional training in health services and outcomes research program. You were on a countless number of AUA Medical Association House of Delegates, public policy, legislative cabinets. You've won multiple fellowships, awards, working with congressmen, research, adoption of telehealth, pediatric robotics. I can't even imagine, how many, can you take me a little bit through how you've accomplished so much in so little time and how you've made a life beyond just this incredible amount of work that you've accomplished?
Well, I don't sleep much, but that's kind of a theme for anybody who's ever gone through a surgical training. When I think it helps to kind of step back, and this will segue into finding your job. It's about figuring out what your priorities are and what's important to you. And you have an opportunity to do that every step of the way in your career. So when in medical school, deciding what you think you value and what you think is going to make a difference to your career and your personal and professional growth. Some folks choose to be very involved in things like, urology interest group as a medical student or a student senate. For me, it was getting involved in health policy early on, and very early on, with the help of some close friends, understanding that there are all these things that affect the way that we practice medicine or will practice medicine that are totally outside of our control if we let them, and taking hold of that and running with it. And that became a priority for me personally early on in my career. And that's kind of been a theme for a lot of the things that I've done throughout that time, whether in medical school or residency or fellowship or now into practice. Now, when you're going out and looking for your first career, that becomes especially important. And I guess if I stress anything about choosing your first job, I would say that it's really, really important to be honest with yourself and honest with what's important to you. I think we get so as far as we do in urology, everybody who matches into urology, they're all type A. They're all some spectrum of type A. They're all extremely successful people. They're all incredibly hardworking. It's the time of year, as you and I both know, that we're all interviewing these amazing candidates for urology residency. And every time I read an application, I say, oh my gosh, there's no way I would match nowadays. Urology applicants are incredibly talented, incredibly smart. And they got that way because they're very goal-oriented. And the goal is to match into urology. And then once you match into urology, the goal becomes, well, how do I become a great surgeon? How do I become a great physician? And for some, it's how do I match into fellowship, or how do I get a job? Well, everybody's going to get a job. Everybody gets a job. Urologists are in high demand. As you know, very, very recently,
I had a lot of imposter syndrome going into my process, finding my first job, but I was astounded at how quickly and how enthusiastically every hospital system, practice, academic center that I interviewed with was extremely excited to hear any urologist is interested in a job out there, because I think there's a statistics going around that there's about 3 jobs for every urologist applying. So yes, if I could give a little advice on that side is, don't stress yourself out beyond belief about finding a job, because there are a lot of amazing opportunities out there right now.
No, there absolutely are. And the thing that we have done our whole lives is we have compromised on other parts of life. And we've compromised on aspects of our personal life or aspects of our professional life, or things that we think, oh, we'll do that later. Well, this is the time to not compromise as much. This isn't time to actually be honest with yourself about what's important to you. If working 4 days a week is important to you, then look for a job where you can work 4 days a week. But don't take a job that says that requires you to work 6 days a week. You're going to be really unhappy with that situation. This is the time to be honest with yourself, whether it's time for research, more time completely away from work, or if you want to live in a place where it never snows, don't go interview for jobs in upstate New York, for example. It's a beautiful, upstate New York can be a beautiful place, but not if you don't love snow.
No, I hear you. As you guys may have heard in the background, my dog just barking. And yeah, everyone has real life. Everyone has other things going on beyond that. And I think there is this sense of, I want to put my best foot forward and come off as 100% above and beyond committed to my job, because let's face it, that's how we were trained, right? To put ourselves last oftentimes, to stay up all night, answer pages, always be positive attitude, do everything for our patients first. And so I think something to kind of consider, and something I want to ask you, is how do you feel it's best to first communicate to potential employers about your priorities outside of work, saying, hey, I'm really interested in working 4 days a week so I can, attend to my family, so I can pursue this other interest. I would consider that type of opportunity, but it has to be within this context without, fearing repercussion.
No, that's a really difficult thing to tease out. I think you have to look at what the terminology they use. So some places will use things like how many patient-facing days or how many OR clinic days a week that you have. And so, or, what does a full clinical FTE mean there? And different places may say different things. And that's where you're going to have figure out the lingo a little bit. Mm-hmm. I recommend talking to people at the practice who you may not have necessarily explicitly interviewed with, but reaching out to folks who are probably in a similar stage to you, but maybe just a couple years ahead, and try to figure out how they feel about it, what their work-life balance is. Because what they're looking for, those folks who you're talking to who are, only a couple years out, maybe just a couple years ahead of you, those are the folks who are looking to have you as a partner for life. And you have to look at the lifestyle that they lead and you say, well, is that the kind of work-life balance that I want? Because these are the people you're going to be partners with for 20, 30 years, potentially, if you choose to stay at the same job, which it's okay if you don't, which could be a whole nother topic about switching jobs early on.
I think that's really important because, my recent experience talking to a number of groups is sometimes they very forwardly paint one picture of a practice. And, they'll often paint their highest achieving surgeon who's making the most RVUs. And the word I heard a lot was the ceiling. There's no ceiling, the world is yours. You can be as productive as you want to. You can make your practice into whatever you want it to be, which is a great sentiment and very inspiring. But at the same time, it has to be grounded in reality. So exactly what you said, talking to different people. How does this work out? Ask up front, even if it's not in your current plans in life, like what's your maternity, paternity leave? What's your family medical leave situation? How does it work out? How do we cover each other? How do you support one another? And see if they can tell you, oh, we have this partner who has, this circumstance and we made it work for them. And, my current partner that I'm going to share an office with only works 3 days a week because she has multiple children. And so we're going to balance that out nicely because she's really excited to have somebody come in and share her practice and mentor them while she's able to attend to her family. And as we have different kind of life stages, and finding that reciprocation, I think is really important. So like you said, looking for examples within the practice and not being kind of fed into some stories of, oh, don't worry about that. That's the way it's going to happen. We'll make sure to provide for you in that sense. If you have concerns about things that people are telling you about work-life balance, I was very honest and clear about that. And also make sure it's, at some points written into your contract. What happens if you don't make the amount of RVUs that is stated and the expectation? What happens if you're not able to fill your clinics or not able to meet your research productivity, especially as you're starting out? A lot of people, I think, will say, oh, don't worry about it. We'll have support for you. But where is that written down in the background, I think, is an important thing to stand up for yourself, and a lot of great advice that I was given along my trail. I don't know if you can speak to that more in the academia sector of how are you protected in your early years when you're searching for a position?
Yeah, no, I want to expand on a point that you said that I think is really important to emphasize. And that's about, being honest about what you want. And if a certain work-life balance is important to you, then you should be explicit with the group about that. Because the more open you are about what you want, the more open they can be with you. And if those two pictures don't match, then it may not be a good fit. And that's okay for things not to be a good fit, because what you don't want is in 2 or 3 years, stringing yourself along and realizing you're not happy because you chose something that doesn't match your own priorities. And so I think, just like you said, like talking to people, being open and honest about it, that's so important when you're looking for your first job, or really probably any job. But the question that you asked about, at least in academia, I will say I got very lucky with where I am. I'm at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and work-life balance was a huge thing to me. I wanted the opportunity to be busy as I wanted to. Coming right out of pediatric urology fellowship, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to do big cases. I wanted to build a program in robotic surgery, which was something we didn't do a lot of for pediatric urology here at UNC before I came. But I also wanted an opportunity to grow professionally. So from a professional standpoint, we are at UNC, we are 0.8 FTEs is a full clinical FTE. So we default have 1 day a week for an opportunity to do things like research or administrative tasks, or for those who wish to do more clinical. And so, I had that honest conversation with my chair. I wanted to continue doing the advocacy and policy work that I found so valuable, that has been so enriching for my own professional development. And he was incredibly encouraging about that, which I found so comforting. And when I talked to my division chief, she stressed the importance of family and making time for your family, because as you and I have both alluded to, we spend so much of our time eschewing work-life balance, focusing on work, that we don't take time to spend with the people who are really the most important to us. And probably the most valuable thing, the thing that I still actually tell residents when they interview here, is my most senior partner, who was our division chief for a long time. He said he's been at UNC for about 25 years. And he said to me, Hans, I dropped my daughters off at work. I dropped my daughters off at school on my way to work. Every single day I was not in the operating room for their entire time that he was here, for 25 years, or rather probably more like 18 years, because they're well out of the house now. But the fact that he was able to do that, the fact that he was able to make that work, even when he was the only pediatric urologist here for a long time, just meant and still means so much to me about the culture of a place. You can tell so much about a culture of the place as you talk to people. And it's the unspoken culture sometimes that you really have to tease out. And that's just so important. Sometimes it's really just a feeling that you get from talking to people. Are they expecting you to crank RVUs, or are they expecting you to be a person and be a urologist and grow?
I think that's absolutely correct. Don't be afraid to talk to people would be my one advice. I can give shout outs to some really senior chief residents that I never even met that came out of my program, that I ran into and at an AUA once, that knows a friend of a friend. They were able to give me so much insight into these kind of intangible aspects, right? I can say, even through the process, we get so many emails and text messages and recruiter after recruiter, but they're all telling you the exact same 4 details, right? Location, average compensation, and expected work productivity. But they're not giving you any of these things like, hey, I can take Friday off every other week to visit my, kids in a different state. I can drop my daughters off at school. I can be home to take my dog out and play tennis and, things that are important to you and that you want to do outside of work, that you kind of have to just like see the lived experience. And I was surprised at how quickly some places you get an immediate vibe that that's just not important to them. There's places that told me like, hey, we want somebody who's going to work hard. We want somebody who's going to be here 5 days a week, seeing as many patients as possible. People make it very clear what they're looking for in a junior partner often, I think, to kind of back up what you said, not only for the positive, but also that these are the types of patients that need to be seen. This is the amount that we want you to see them. This is how we need to fill our clinics and improve our throughput as a health system. And you got to take that to heart. You can't be convinced that, oh, when I come, it'll be different. They listened, etc. I think that's really important. There's a question I had sent you, and I'm curious if you have an answer to this, but just to shift a little bit, has your pursuit of kind of a better work-life balance altered any of your clinical practice? Is there anything, specific cases you've backed off of doing or given up, XYZ part of your outpatient practice, your robotics practice, anything that you've had to cut back on over time and realize that, this experience maybe is not worth the amount of effort, throughput, commitment this takes away from my external life?
Yeah, no, so when I started, I actually was 20% seeing adult patients. So just general urology.
Yeah.
That was through a combination of factors. One, I like all of urology. Urology is an incredible field. It's fascinating. And every aspect of it I found just fascinating. And I mean, it's why we choose urology. So I was seeing 20% adults, but I wasn't seeing oncology, even though I love oncology. But the issue that I was running into is everything I saw was mostly non-operative, which as a urologist, as a surgeon, you want to be operating, at least on the adult side. And I didn't have block time for adult surgery. So towards the end of that first year, it started getting more and more stressful because I wasn't seeing a lot of operative cases, and I didn't have time to do surgery on the ones that needed surgery, which took some of the fun out of it, because one of the neat things about urology is that you can see an issue, you can see a problem full circle from initial diagnosis to medical management to surgical management to follow-up, which is one of the really neat things about our specialty. And I just wasn't able to really do that completely. At the same time, our department needed more people seeing general urology, men's health when I joined, but we had a number of people who joined our faculty or joined our team since I had started to be able to pick up some of that, including folks who actually specialized in men's health, which was great for us. So I backed off of that, and I immediately filled that time with pediatric urology. So now I see everything pediatric urology, from prenatal consultation till actually I see some folks up to 30 years old, from, easy things, simple things like circumcisions and circumcision revisions to proximal hypospadias, redo robotic surgery. So I see the full spectrum right now. I will say that, talking to colleagues across the country, some of them have cut out things like taking care of spina bifida patients in pediatric urology, just because of the bandwidth or the amount of time or investment it takes personally to take care of certain very complex conditions. Some of my colleagues who are, say, in general practice do predominantly things like, they really only do big kidney surgery cases, or some tend to focus specifically on BPH or focal therapy. Some are doing just prostates and kidneys, not doing bladder cancer. Some of that is influenced by the practice, and some of that is personal choice. And so I think that's really important, not just when you're a year in a practice, but when you're getting started. If you know there are conditions you want to spend more time seeing or conditions you want to spend less time seeing, it's important to talk to the practice about that. Because if you're trying to build, say, a practice where you're learning to do whole-ups and you're doing a lot of whole-ups, then you want a place where they're going to send you whole-ups, or that there is a population who needs them. If you're going to be the fifth whole-up person, there may not be a lot of whole-ups to go around in a group. But that's important to let them know up front, because you want to be able to be happy professionally as well. And that includes doing the cases, seeing the patients that you want to see.
I think the thread that I took away from what you just said is, again, another point I want to feel like that you have to almost untrain yourself from learning about and during training is being a good team player, right? You joined a job and they said, hey, this is what the department needs right now. We need to see this type of patients because our wait list is this long, and these are the types of things that are. And I think something that I'm thinking about and, trying to decide how I would deal with is becoming, a junior partner. You want to take the cases that your senior partners, want to give down to you and help the department out and be a good team player. But, the balance of how you do that within what makes you, professionally fulfilled is not eating away at your kind of work-life balance that you're adding and double, triple booking your clinic. I think is a really tough thing because, right, we're used to being all on one big team, nobody goes home till the work gets done kind of thing, environment, and, picking and choosing what makes sense for you and yourself, I think is a really important kind of soul search that needs to be done as you're searching for a position.
Yeah. And sometimes, it's very hard to evaluate for ourselves. That soul searching can be very difficult unless you have somebody who can help you do that soul searching, whether it's a partner, a spouse, best friend, a family member who can really help you decide, like, okay, what's really important to you? Because self-reflection is really hard. And I'll admit that I'm not the best at self-reflection either. And thankfully, my wife knows me better than I know myself. And so she will always tell me, you are happy doing this. No, you're not happy doing that. Usually it's at a point when I've kind of strung my own self along into believing that I really want to do something. And she needs to tell me, you know what? No, you need to be honest with yourself. This is what you actually like doing. This is what you don't like doing. And that's important to have in somebody close to you when you're trying to decide what to do with the rest of your life.
No, I completely agree. And I think it's, again, I've had a lot of attendings tell me, finding your first job and putting yourself out there in the beginning, everyone has told me you're never almost sometimes more in power of your career trajectory as I am starting that first job, right? There's a lot of data that shows if you, start at a lower compensation level, you start doing something you don't like, it's kind of harder to dig yourself out of a hole than to have advocated for yourself into a position where you're doing things that you want to be doing, you're getting appropriately compensated, you're working the amount that you want to be working versus ending up in a position and going backwards and convincing yourself that, oh, it's going to be right. It's going to be okay. I wanted this. I signed up for this. And, if we're good at anything, being surgeons is like sticking to our gut, getting through something, no matter how difficult and torturous it can be. And I see you smiling, meaning you probably have some idea of some case or situation or research project you put yourself in that you had to grin and bear your way through.
I think we've all had those cases as a resident. We've all had those cases when you're in training where you're just standing at the table and you just kind of like, you take a second and you think, wait, where am I?
Yeah.
What did I choose to do with the rest of my life?
Is this really a good idea? Yeah. Is it too late out? Yeah, no. And then all of a sudden you have power. You have the power to have some choice over this. You're not in a position where you can't leave the table and you have to do a certain number of cases to graduate, and things have really changed. So I think it's very empowering to have these conversations and to, I feel very honored to get the time to sit here and talk to you about this and have people listen to our input on how to soul search and figure this out. I think another question, and this is a hot topic, especially in kind of women in urology and especially talking about emotional and home labor, but are there any tasks in your professional or personal life that you've outsourced? And is anything in this kind of arena changed your ability to meet your work-life expectations?
So my situation is there are some similarities and some differences that people will find, obviously. So my wife, she works full-time. She's an OBGYN. She has both administrative and research positions, and she's quite the powerhouse, far outshining me. She finished her residency when I finished my medical school because I was MD PhD. So when I was an intern, she was in her first year of practice. So when I started my first year of practice,
God bless her.
Starting her 9th year of practice. Yeah, I think if I ever decide to get another degree, that might just end it for us. she's ready for having a job. And I think she's happy that I actually have a job finally after so many years. And so early on, even when there are certain things you realize that there are certain stressors on your life, whether it's your life with another person or your life in general, that you don't find any joy in, that are only just prevent you from doing the things you value, and you have the means to outsource them, then outsource them. For example, cleaning your house, right? By the time you're in practice, you should have the financial means, if you choose, and if you have a partner if you're with a partner and your partner agrees, and that becomes a source of tension, then outsource it, right? That things, if it's your laundry or your dry cleaning, tasks that prevent you from doing things that you value. So, we have 2 kids, and there are a lot of things that are just day-to-day mundane things, like making lunches for the next day, or doing the laundry, or, mowing the lawn, or like I said, cleaning the house. We outsource those things because it allows us to spend more time actually enjoying our time with our family. And so instead of, working on packing lunches every night, we can actually maybe play a board game with our kids. Or instead of mowing the lawn on the weekends, because you got to mow it every week in North Carolina because it is warm here, we can actually go on a bike ride with our kids, or we can go, do a project together, or play a game, or play outside. We can actually spend active time with them. And that's our choice. And not everybody does that. And I have plenty of friends who love mowing their lawns because it's just like a ritual for them. But for me, for us, we chose to outsource that, and we don't regret that decision at all. So tasks that take away from your ability to do the things that are important to you, if you have the ability to outsource them, outsource them.
Well, I think that's a very powerful message, that sometimes, residents are unable to take advantage of some of those things due to, financial and time constraints, but, isn't something to be ashamed of, isn't something to say that you're, incapable, you don't enjoy, but the prioritization of the time you have away from work. I wanted to ask you one more thing. I think we have a little more time here. Do you have any advice for dealing with situations where you feel like an employer or a colleague or someone else just continues to infringe on your time outside of work, and kind of how to handle possibly a conversation as, you're starting a new job and realizing that, what was set in front of you sometimes isn't always, what's carried out on the back end? How would you recommend, starting a conversation regarding your maintaining those boundaries?
Now, I will fully admit, my situation was not in one where I felt like anybody was infringing more on my time than myself. So
we are recording this at 9:45 on a Monday too. So
my choices. For me personally, it's very easy to let your clinical life bleed into your non-clinical life. Okay. It's, as a resident, like, how often are you checking stuff at night that you really, really don't need to check? Or when you're off on a weekend, you're like, I wonder what happened to that patient. So you have to be really good about not working when you're not supposed to be working. But also, if you have, say, a day you're supposed to be doing, you wanted to do research, then don't open your electronic medical record unless, you have to for your research. But setting those boundaries for yourself is incredibly important, and only you can hold yourself accountable. So I found myself, I spent a lot of my administrative days actually doing cases and operating, because I just needed to get cases done. And both my division chief and my chair told me that I need to make sure I protect that time to be able to do the other things that are important for my career and for academic advancement. Because they knew those things were important to me, but they also knew that, like so many of us, we see something that we need to do, and it becomes a task, and we like making sure we get our tasks done. Mm-hmm. Now, if you run into a situation like you described, where you feel like you're getting external pressure to do these other things, do your clinical work, to bleed into your your personal time or other professional time, you have to be able to have an open enough relationship with your employer, your boss, your direct supervisor, your chief, whoever that person is, and say like, look, this is where I where I am and where I see myself going but this is where I want to be. And you ask them for advice, right? This is where it's important to have a mentor or a coach in your life, whether formal or informal. And it may not be your boss, it may be somebody else. And sometimes it's helpful to go to that person first, and you have to see what they say. And if their reaction is, yeah, we know you want to be there, but really this is just kind of where everybody goes, then you have to decide, am I okay with that or not? And if you're not okay with that, then the hardest thing we do, I think, when we start is if we realize that where we are is not where we want to be. And that can be really, really scary. And I have a number of friends who have switched jobs within the first 5 years of practice because they realized that where they started was not where they wanted to be. And it is okay not to stay in your first job forever. Of course, everybody wants that. And no matter how many times you hear it, it just needs to be repeated. There's a good chance you will not stay in your first job. And there's a good chance you won't stay in that job for even 5 years. And that's okay. And not everybody gets everything right the first time. And also your priorities may change. And so if you find, and you have to have that conversation, you have to be honest about the conversation, right? If you say you're unhappy, you have to be able to describe what you're unhappy about. So you have to think about it. If you feel like your career is going a way that's different than what you thought, you need to be able to talk to your job about that. And hopefully they're going to be supportive, and hopefully they're going to help you get there.
I think that's just really incredible to kind of sit there and be open. And I think that's another big takeaway here, I would say, is when you're looking for a job and talking to potential employers, departments, partners, are these people you feel like you can have an open conversation with? People who are going to give you the time to say, come to my office, let's meet for have a coffee, answer a text, understand if you have something else going on. Because everyone can bring up any type of situation where exactly what you stated occurs. You're unhappy with something for XYZ reason, whether it's in your personal or professional life, and you need to either talk it out or find someone who's able to help invoke a solution for you. I think, a new title for our podcast here is going to be Soul Searching Personal Life and Career in Urology, because a takeaway from talking to you is just understanding, you have to be your own advocate through this process. Nobody is going to tell you that, this is the exact right job that you have to take. This is the position you have to be in. This is the research organization or team or AUA committee you have to join in your career, right? Suddenly you have all this power to decide where you want to take your career and what you want to spend your time on. And I think that can be almost a little scary. I felt this way looking for jobs and not going to a fellowship match. I was like, wow, this is really the first time in my adult life I've had like a plethora of options. Because, right, think about it. Those of us fortunate enough to get into medical school, it's normally not 100, it's normally 1 or 2. Then you get your residency match, you get your fellowship match. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, my mind is going to explode. I always complained about not having choices, and now I'm overwhelmed by too many choices. So it really is a total 180 in the decision-making process. And sometimes I think it can be just as challenging, if not more.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we think of how many flyers you get in the mail every day about try this job, or the emails you get from employers, or, some of them even find your pager number, which I don't love, but getting pages from recruiters about potential job opportunities. I mean, people want you as a urologist, whether you're fellowship trained or not fellowship trained, they want you because you can do something that is so in demand and continues to grow. And there are urologists needed all over the country, in every city, in every practice type, in every subspecialty. Urologists are and continue to be in such high demand. You will undoubtedly have more options than you can handle. And especially early on, you have to start thinking about, okay, what is important to me, right? If you want to ride horses, living in New York City is probably not the best place, but living in a place like Montana might be fantastic, right? If you want easy access to an international airport so you can travel every weekend, then maybe living in a very rural area is probably not the best for you. But living in a big city probably is. And so thinking about those things early on to help you narrow down your search very early on is going to be important as well.
Yeah. And I think the idea and the phenomenon, and I think many of us have spent a late night in residency thinking about, the grass being greener on the other side, and understanding that nothing you do is going to be 100% the exact job you want, the exact perfect everything. Everything has its pros and cons, but really balancing it out. And like you said, finding what's important. And, these are the things that are the non-negotiables. This is what I have to have, or the region I have to be in, or the type of practice I want to be in. And from there, everything else is kind of fungible, and you can find a position that you make it work for you within the confines of what you set. But almost sitting down and starting to think about, what's important in my career? What do I want my career to look like, and how am I going to get there? And what's important in my life? Where do I need to live? What kind of environment do I need to be around for my partner, my family, myself? And I think those things oftentimes need to be weighted equally, and can be weighted equally, where, in prior decisions we've made in our careers and our trainings, we wasn't always capable of being able to weigh some of those life factors as heavily in our decisions.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It goes back to what you were saying before. For the first time in your life, you have the bargaining power, right? And for so much of it, you do not. And you finally have this skill set. You finally have the knowledge to say, this is what I want with my life, and here's what I want to do, and having the ability to go get it. And people will come to you and will work around you to get that. And that's something that I think everybody needs to realize as they're coming out of their training, looking for their first job, is you really, really, really get to be truly honest about what's important to you and what you want for you, for your family, for your professional life.
I echo that 1000%. And looking for your first job, it's a crazy, wild experience, what people are willing to offer you and give you, and listen to what you want, and, take everything you have to say and all the things that you feel are important in your life and your career to heart, and work with you and negotiate with you to get there. A lot of people that I spoke to have been through this, job process in the last 5 years, repeatedly told me, I wish I had asked for more, or I wish I had talked about this thing or that thing, because you get overwhelmed. All of a sudden, somebody's giving you this contract for this, very decent amount of money and a very important job, and you finally made it there, and you're like, this is good. I got everything that I thought I wanted. And then looking back in their first years of practice, they're like, wow, I realized my partner has this, and they were able to negotiate for this, and this is what worked out well for their practice. And they were like, the world's the limit, because we have a lot of the bargaining power. And I'm saying nobody's going to say yes to every one of your requests or everything that you want to kind of change about your contract, about your job. But I think there's more than I realized going into the process for myself, is there's a lot more flexibility in all aspects of your job. And maybe ultimately originally planned or even thought about as this is feasibly possible, but it's suddenly your practice and you're the one who's in the driver's seat.
Yes. And I think that to take that one step further, it's okay to change your mind after you start about what's important to you. If I decided, I don't want to do, I don't know, if I don't want to see proximal hypospadias anymore, right? I have partners who'll see that, so I could potentially stop doing something like that, right? Because for one reason or another, I just don't. Just using that as an example, you as a general urologist might decide, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to see stones anymore, for example. Then
good luck to my practice.
Right. I mean, you can have that conversation with them, but it's okay to change your mind. But then you have to talk to your practice about it. Nobody should get upset at you if you realize their priorities are different. Now, it may be a conversation, right? It may not be possible for you to stop seeing stones entirely, just as an example, but maybe you can stop doing complex stones, or maybe you can see fewer stones, or you might be able to pick up more in another area. For me, when I stopped seeing adults, it was a conversation with my division chief in my chair about not seeing adults anymore. But you know what? I was able to ramp up my pediatric practice immediately. And so, I quickly filled my time, and they were very supportive of that because they realized also it wasn't really helping me advance personally or professionally as well. And the need that we had for somebody to see them, that went away when we hired more people. So it worked out, but that was also a bit of timing. And so if any of those factors didn't work out, like, for example, if I wasn't going to be able to ramp up my pediatric side of my practice, or we didn't have folks to be able to see the adult side, then might have been a slightly different conversation. But the important thing is that you're able to be open about that and work on a plan to get you to where you want to be if that's not where you are right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, you see all the stuff written on websites like Doximity and Medscape about how much it costs a hospital system or a practice to replace a physician. Much less I'm just experiencing now the amount of time and people invested in getting, my practice that's starting in over a year from now, or I guess a little less than a year from now. Wow, time's flying. But licensing and credentialing and all these pathways, it is teams of people and oodles of money to get a physician started up in a practice. So it's really in the benefit, I think, of most practices and health systems to try to work with you to make you happy, to make you fulfilled. So you want to continue, you want to stay there, you want to build a practice, and you want to be a great member of the team that they can be proud of. So I think that's another thing you kind of have to always remember in your back pocket is, I would say, the vast majority of people want you to succeed in your position and want you to find success and fulfillment from it because, regardless of what you think is good in their hearts, it is also of their financial benefit to keep you there and to keep you working.
That's very true.
Got to look at both sides of the coin here.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
All right. Well, I think we're almost out of time here. Is there anything else, Dr. Arora, that you think is, super important that you put out there into the AUA universe about keeping your work-life balance when you're finding your first job?
I think you and I have both said it, and it's being honest with yourself. That's, as you're looking for that job, being honest with yourself about what you want, about what's important to you. As long as you keep that in mind, then that will help guide you throughout your entire process. And that doesn't just go for the first job search, but the second job search or second or third job search. That goes for every aspect of your personal and professional life, is being honest with yourself about what you value and what's important.
I love it. I'm going to make like a motivational poster and put it on the wall of my office next year as a great reminder of this conversation we had tonight. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Dr. Arora, and sharing with the AUA here all your wisdoms about work-life balance. And it was really my pleasure to get to know you over this time period. And really just another plug for getting involved in the AUA. I joined a committee a few years ago, and I'm still getting the opportunity to do amazing things and meet people that honestly our paths probably would have never crossed in real life, being a pediatric urologist in North Carolina and being a general urologist and future general urologist in New York City. But the AUA is a really special place that allows us to meet and have these great conversations.
No, I absolutely agree, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having me tonight. It was such a pleasure to be able to do this. I hope that this was helpful for, all those people who are looking for their first jobs. And, whether you or anybody else who's looking for their first job now that you've already settled on yours, you're always welcome to reach out to me via email. And I'm always happy to help people think through that process.
I echo that statement. Find me on LinkedIn, the websites, the Google. Anyway, it's pretty easy to get in contact with us these days, almost too easy. And I echo that. So many people that I met through my path in really small instances ended up being very remarkably wonderful mentors and very extremely helpful entities when it came to my job process. So really don't count out anybody that you meet along the way, because you never know who's going to provide you a reference, and you never know who's going to turn out to be your partner someday.
No, that's so true. That's so true. Thank you again, Stephanie. We really appreciate the time here.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership and Business Podcast. We invite you to discover the full range of leadership and business programs offered through the AUA Institute for Leadership and Business. Simply visit auanet.org and navigate to the Leadership and Business tab to learn more.